I must also tell you that she spoke for roughly 30 minutes at 100 words a minute, which is the BBC norm. This comes to about 3,000 words. And 3,000 words would have occupied 4.5 columns of the Times of India. I do not think I would have, as the editor, allowed even a fraction of that space for something as important as RTI to figure in it. Because a newspaper has to deal with all kinds of things. It has to address all kinds of issues. And each one feels that there ought to be a little more space given for his or her favorite subjects. So I constantly hear businessmen complaining that not enough space is given to discuss business news. And I hear a lot of people in the sports field saying that too much space is given to cricket, but not enough is given to Hututu or hockey, and so on and so forth. So you've got to understand, first of all, that a newspaper has to deal with a huge number of subjects. Secondly, that you are in a highly competitive market, and you therefore got to anticipate what the readership wants, what the viewership wants, because it is a two-way process. If the readers and viewers do not like what you give them, they will reject you. That's the law of the market, and this is something that has happened time and again. To put it very bluntly, if the media were to follow Nandini's list of demands of what the media should be doing, it should focus on the poor and the marginalized. It should inform and enlighten, but not just entertain. It is losing its credibility. Its watchdog role is being neglected. You need complete objectivity. You should not be cocooned in your commercialized world. Why is media metrocentric? Why are there more stories about rural India, etc., etc.? If the media were to follow this very noble prescriptive advice, within a matter of months, 3/4 of the newspapers in this country would close down. And I believe most news channels would face acute financial problems. The reason is that there is space for each of these things. It is a heterogeneous role that the media plays. When you speak of the role of the media has roles, not just one single role. There is a role whether you want to discuss fashion, there's a role whether you want to discuss films, there's a role for sports, alas, there's even a role for astrological columns, and so on and so forth. So, please understand the nature of the beast. And the nature of the beast is that you've got to be attentive to various sections of interests of the readership. If you give 8 pages a day only on all the great noble causes that need to be defended, your paper will sink. And this has happened. Newspapers which have tried valiantly to promote all the right causes, all the noble causes, have just gone under. Because you can't, in a highly competitive market, sustain a newspaper of that kind. That's my first remark. My second remark is that the media attracts far more criticism than any of the other 3 pillars of a democracy. Media should do this, media should do that, media should do this. But not enough is asked about politicians or about bureaucrats. An American philosopher, journalist, Walter Lippmann, many years ago, had said that you've got to have your watchdog role, certainly, but never can you be a substitute for an opposition party in parliament. The main job of the opposition can never ever be handled by the media. So each one has a role. If the opposition doesn't play its part, then someone else will play the part. In a country like ours, I think we have had a very activist tradition. The Supreme Court has been in the forefront in the past several years of taking hugely important decisions in favor of press freedom, but also in favor of a large number of issues that have been mentioned in favor of the poor or the marginalized and so on and so forth. They've done a job, and the newspapers and media have reflected, echoed, commented on these extremely important and significant judgments. In addition, you've got within the system itself a certain number of checks and balances, and to which not too many people have made an answer to. For example, among the sources of factual information on policies that you can get are the transcripts of the question hour in Parliament. That is where ministers are obliged to answer questions raised by MPs and give factual answers. There was a time, a few years ago, when one political correspondent's job was to go through the transcripts on a daily basis and cull from them a certain number of stories which had a direct bearing on topical issues of topical interest. No one does that anymore, for a variety of reasons. My third point is that within the system itself, not too much attention is focused on the kind of debates that go on within Parliament but outside the glare of television. You know, you now have Lok Sabha television and so on, where you can follow the debates in the House continuously. But those debates are really not meant for any serious exchange of views. They are meant to appeal to the local constituency. So there'll be deliberately a lot of grandstanding, provocative speeches and so on. The actual debates, based on documents, based on close argument and reasoning, goes on in the standing committees of various ministries of Parliament. And this is where, if you take the pains to go to these things, you're going to get a huge amount of information, which incidentally is what a lot of newspapers and media channels have begun to do. So the point I'm making is, does media have a role in governance? It does have a role, like everything else has a role. The main role, however, of governance is that of Parliament. It is a good thing that Mr. Anna Hazare has awakened the conscience of the country to this phenomenon of corruption. But there comes a time when the issue then has to be taken up in the proper quarters. You cannot emasculate the prerogative of Parliament as the supreme body of the country to debate this issue. Should they consider a document that's prepared by Anna Hazare's team? Of course they should consider. They should consider documents prepared by just about everyone. You should invite as many suggestions as you like, deliberate on them, and see what happens. That's the way to do it. The government, unfortunately, set up a group which included Mr. Hazare and his team, together with ministers of the central government. What is the impression that you've given? That you've chosen complete outsiders, unelected people, in order to help you draft the bill, when they could have been asked to go and talk and brief individual political parties, who in turn could have given their inputs in order to make the bill meaningful, strong, effective. This was not done. The media, therefore, again has to be seen not as some kind of an entity which has an agenda cocooned in commercialism. If things were cocooned in commercialism, then you would not have had the kind of media that you do. Secondly, you have also media which is as heterogeneous as the rest of the country. You've got good newspapers, you've got poor newspapers, you've got great TV channels, you've got indifferent TV channels. And that heterogeneity is very much there, because that's the way the country is. To question the legitimacy of the media, as Nandini has done by saying it lacks credibility, is on par with a certain middle-class Anna Hazare-led mission to denigrate all politicians, to denigrate all bureaucrats. And the result is, you begin by denigrating politicians, you end up by denigrating politics itself. And that's to say, you end up by denigrating the very process of democracy, which is messy, which is slow, which takes time to move forward, And there is therefore you inculcate in a very, very subconscious manner this great need for a Messiah, a tough person who will set things right, who will not be corrupt, who will be morally led, who will be upright, etc. The search for a Messiah in a democracy is a sure sign of the advent of dictatorship. It's been tried before. We've got to learn to live with a mess. Democracy is a mess. The media too is a mess. But so are our lives. If you look around, everything is in a state of flux. And I shall end up by merely saying that the main role of the media, as I see it, is even while you focus on personalities and events, you should have space to step backwards a little bit in order to look at trends and processes that account for these events. The trends and processes is what television can't give you because of the very nature of the medium. If evening after evening you watch 6 people yelling at each other, the same 6 people yelling in the same manner on different issues night after night, at the end of it all, what is it that you've understood? Where is the perspective that you get? What is the big picture that you present? The role, therefore, is primarily one of looking at events, but placing them in perspective, providing the background, and doing it in as succinct a manner. If I want to speak for 30 minutes to explain something, the attention span of people is over. You either tell people something nicely, straightforward, without dilly-dallying, that this is at the heart of the problem. Let me give you the most recent example. This morning, we were in front of a large number of very bright students of journalism studying in various colleges here in Goa. I asked them what was the most significant development, news-wise, over the past 24 hours. So someone said Lokpal Mail, someone said something else. The fact of the matter is that the most significant development has been the fact that the American rating of 3As has been downgraded to AA+. And what this means in terms of the impact on the global economy is something that we've had to come to terms with, because it is going to affect adversely every economy in the world. The ones who might be just about able to avoid the worst are those which have very strong internal markets. But otherwise it is going to be hell to pay. No newspaper, and certainly no television channel, gave the big picture. What is the meaning? Who are these people who give these ratings? Why are they taken seriously? Why did the American government say that there is a major mistake of $2 trillion in the manner in which the whole thing was assessed? Why was this fact admitted and yet the ratings were not changed? These are questions that need to be asked. You might say, what is the connection of all this with good governance? Once again, newspapers should not be opposition leaders, the judiciary. At the same time, each one has a job to do. Here the job is first and foremost, make sure that your reporting is as factual as possible. Secondly, make sure that you provide the reader or the viewer with a background. And thirdly, for God's sake, trust in the intelligence of the reader and the viewer to determine whether what you're saying is persuasive or not. Because the minute you start telling the media to do this or do that or accept this rule, then you enter into a minefield. Because someone will turn and say, look, you want us to be in favor of the poor, but so does the Communist Party of India. Why is it that we should believe you more than the Communist Party of India? Similarly, you take up moral cudgels on behalf of this or that issue, but there are several others who are also competing for that same space. The best thing is, don't shoot the messenger. The media is both a reflection of what goes on in the nation and in society, but the manner in which it reflects all that also helps to shape issues. On the question of priorities, now there again, if you accept the fact that people's interests are varied. This morning someone said, what's the need of putting Aishwarya Rai's pregnancy on page 1? Alright, it was there. The fact is, look, Aishwarya Rai is Aishwarya Rai. Pregnancy is news for a lot of people who are completely obsessed with Bollywood. I'm not. I won't read it. But if there are people who are taking interest in that, likewise, why is it that Dravid not playing in ODI is front page news? That's because there are a lot of cricket lovers here who want to read that rather than read the nth story about what happens because a bureaucrat or a politician has gone wild. Understand, therefore, media are operating in a hugely competitive market. The word market doesn't mean necessarily crass commercialization, because there are some excellent papers doing very well in the marketplace. Likewise, there are excellent news channels doing very well in the marketplace. So be a little bit more tolerant of the diversity of the media. And finally, my request to a lot of people who want the media to listen to that is to focus attention on the emerging media scene. And the emerging media scene is that it's happening in the advanced countries, it's happening very rapidly in developing countries like ours. Increasingly, you're going to be able to get news that is customized. And you're going to get views that are customized. Meaning, if Mrs. Vineeta Deshmukh wants her people to all day long read stories about what RTI activists are doing in the country, it would be entirely possible on your BlackBerry to get all those stories. But don't expect the Times of India to do that. Similarly, if you would want someone who's in for a good cause, secularism, transparency and so on, you can customize the whole thing and get it the way you want. But don't expect the papers, because the space of papers is limited. The competition is very high. In that context, what are the kind of things that need to be done? I think a forward-looking media policy related to governance will encourage the kind of work that Vineeta Deshmukh is doing at the local level. Nothing says things of that kind appear in the local press, they don't appear in the national press. The fact of the matter is that when I go to Sikkim, the first thing they say is Sikkim never appears in the national press. Right. When you go to Tripura, they say, when is the last time that Tripura figured in the national press? So everyone wants the national press or the national news channels to reflect what they want. Whereas in fact, the most effective news channels are those that function locally. If you want to make an impression on the movers and shakers anywhere, then that pressure ought to come from the local media. And then if there are issues which demand that the state government should function, then there are newspapers, very good ones, operating at the state level. And then the national newspapers take up certain issues at the national level. So this kind of a differentiated approach, I think, will help us to better understand how media functions. As of now, after listening to Nandini, one gets the feeling that you've got a demonized media, irresponsible, cocooned in their commercialism, interested more in Aishwarya Rai than Anna Hazare. Incidentally, I am. More interested in cricket, more interested in celebrity. I don't read those celebrity pages. Whenever I get the newspaper, it's those colored supplements that I put aside, and I'm not interested. But I know of a huge number of people who will put the main paper aside to be able to read the supplements first. Now, how do you, on what criteria do you tell them don't do that? They will learn. After 2, 3, 4 years, they'll move on and read other things as well. So in a democracy as thriving and vibrant as ours, please learn the virtue of tolerance. Let 100 flowers bloom, and let 100 schools of thought contend, as Mao Zedong famously put it. And let people make up their mind. Do they want to read this or read that? And I'm absolutely certain that things will change, because there comes a time of what I call there's a fatigue with the frivolous. The fatigue with the frivolous happens because you can't go on and on and on about which actor is having an affair where, etc. After a while you get tired of that. Or whether someone has lost 2 inches and someone has lost half an inch. There comes a time when you say enough, okay, let's move on. So I believe that this again is going to be a reflection of the market. The fatigue of the frivolous is going to force the media to change course. And this changing of course has taken place in our country time and again. But to invoke what Gandhiji said about the role of the media, or what Lokmanya Tilak said about the role of the media, but if they could fight for a just cause, why is the Times of India not doing it now? Because there was no democracy at that time. They were fighting a colonial power. You've got a democratic system today. You've got a huge number of options before you. If you do not like a particular channel, you switch off, you move on to something else. And even that won't be necessary, because increasingly, what young people are doing, certainly what my own children are doing, is they get all the news that they want on the net. And as net usage continues, as bandwidth becomes more and more interesting, you're going to get information of the kind that you want. You're going to get opinions as varied as you can. And I think this is going to be the beginning of an enlightened citizenship. Citizens ought to be vigilant. Citizens ought to be concerned. And then you begin to cease demonizing politicians, bureaucrats, judges, media, and then you would not really need messianic men to come and give you a moral lesson of how to conduct the nation and how to govern it. I think this is broadly my perspective, but in the course of questioning, if there are questions, I'm quite prepared to give you examples of how the Americans, in particular, have been discussing this question with a great deal of common sense. They are concerned about the credibility of the media. They are concerned about how the media has refused to ask the tough questions. And the tough questions really are the big questions. Why is it that CWG happened? Is it because just one particular man turned out to be a crook? Or was there some systemic reasons behind for these things to happen? This requires hard work. This requires patience. It requires going through documents. It requires a certain understanding of how systems work. And in journalism schools today, I think that is something that needs to be taught. It is so much easier to get 6 people to yell at each other rather than sending out a team of reporters to investigate a particular kind of thing, because it's more expensive. People don't want to spend that kind of money. So there are serious problems with the media. But among the serious problems, certainly not the most serious problem, is not because they are neglecting their role as so-called watchdogs. It's simply because they are responding to an evolving situation, a changing situation. And I know very few societies in the world which are changing as swiftly as Indian society. And the media can't be immune from that. Media are changing. Right? Also the fact is, most of those who call upon the media to do this and do that don't understand that 70% of this country's population is less than 30 years old. Has someone taken the pains to go and find out and sit across with them? Because there again, they're serious people, they're frivolous people, they're all kinds of people. But at least you'll be listening to how they perceive their role. In the morning, someone said they don't take interest in politics. They don't take interest in politics, again, because everything's changed in this country. In the past 20 years, there have been a major change in the outlook of people. I remember 25 years ago, I said this morning, 25 years ago, the locus of power and authority was New Delhi. That is more or less over now. Power has shifted. The locus of power has shifted to the state capitals and is shifting even below. Power has shifted away from government to the market. It's shifted away from the state to civil society. All these big changes have taken place. There are many more changes. I think a whole gerontocratic India has given way to a young India. An inward-looking India has given way to an outward-looking India. An India which was technophobic has now become technophilic, and so on and so forth. All these things have to be reflected in the media, and they are being reflected, provided one doesn't consistently demonize them for failing to be good and noble and kind. If there is one major handicap that the media has, and I think that's true not just the media, but all of us, the biggest crime you can commit really is to bore people. So long as the media don't bore you, they keep you informed, they keep you entertained, you're all right. The trouble with a lot of do-gooders is that after about 3 minutes, you've heard all the noble sentiments, and then you want to get on in life and say, all right, take these suggestions. I think the RTI is a lovely example, and activist judiciary is a very fine thing. You've got to get the opposition moving into it. You've got to pay more attention to the work of standing committees. And I think in the end, all of us will be a little more balanced in the way we look at it. Overall, I believe, and I told the journalism students this, we are entering an absolutely fantastic period for the Indian media. Our societies are changing. The way we look at the world is changing. The kind of self-confidence that we are gaining as a people, that is remarkable. And despite all the problems that we have, I'm not the one who believes in constantly hailing India and what a great nation and what a great part it is, because on the Human Development Index you're still way down the list. So you've again got to strike a balance. But overall, the mood in the country today has never been more propitious for newspaper, for people interested in journalism, interested in the media, to come and feel you've got new technologies available and you've got new ideas coming up. You're getting rid of a whole number of things that have held you back for the past several years, so-called state socialism, etc., etc. And I, for one, if I'm asked, if you had to begin all over again, what would you do? I'd say I'd still be a journalist. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargava. And I mean, I know no matter how much you'll have asked of me, but in the end you did say that there will be fatigue with the frivolous. People are going to get fatigued with the frivolous. So anyway, you've heard 3 different views, and now I invite the participants.
Hi, my name is Giriraj. I am a part of an NGO called Strengths of Good Governance. See if any of you can answer the question, but what Dr. Bhargava said, that media is the only one which is hounded or questioned and not the politicians. I think it's too much of self-importance for the media. It is the politicians who are often asked. My second question is, generally the media ignores the rot within themselves or their system and questions others. The likes of Barkha Datta or maybe VIII Sanghavi have been known for means which is not the most moralist one, but yet they ask for resignations of people like Ashok Chavan or somebody like Yedurappa. So I just want to know, is there anything that media is doing to kind of clean their own system before asking for resignations from politicians?
I don't think you mentioned 2 names, and for a variety of reasons, as you know, one of them has more or less ceased all activity in that particular publication. The other one is very much there. What has been known about them is what has been exposed in the transcripts of the conversation that Ms. Radia had with the concerned individuals. Neither of them has ever been indicted in a court of law. And I think therefore that if you want definitive judgment on whether their attitudes were correct, incorrect, we'll have to wait. Nevertheless, the fact that they figured so prominently would mean that within newspaper establishments, there has been a great deal of discussion, and this much I can vouch for. Now, what happens afterwards is something else. I don't think you can put on